It sits beside laptops in paper cups and steams quietly on kitchen tables. But look past the porcelain and the soft steam, and you find a complex system of taste, addiction, and global control. To understand how that happened, we have to travel back to the Green Mountains of southwest China. Long before it became a global commodity, the plant we call Camellia sinensis grew wild in the forest, a leaf known only to local foragers and monks. Early legends describe its power in dramatic terms. One story tells of a mythical emperor who discovered the leaf when it drifted into his boiling water. Another, darker Buddhist legend says tea plants sprouted from the discarded eyelids of a monk who was determined to stay awake during meditation. These stories point toward tea's original function as a biological tool. It was a leaf that fought sleep, a plant that helped humans manage their own consciousness in the fragile space between exhaustion and revelation. By the 7th century, the Tang dynasty had turned this wild plant into an elite cultural art. The writer Lu Yu published The Classic of Tea, teaching Chinese civilization to see the leaf through the lens of philosophy and aesthetics. Lu Yu focused on the smallest details: the quality of the water, the shape of the utensils, and the required mood of the drinker. He turned a medicinal habit into a practice of refinement. While scholars refined the ritual, the state took notice of the material. Dried tea was durable, easy to transport across long distances, and highly sought after. Once the imperial government began taxing and regulating the harvest, the leaf became a political system. It was now a source of revenue and strategic power that could be projected across borders. Moving this taxable commodity across Asia required immense physical effort. Caravans navigated the treacherous slopes of the tea horse road, where porters carried loads so heavy their bodies bent under the weight. In the cold highlands, tea took the form of dense, durable bricks. These functioned as a hard currency, traded directly for the horses and supplies needed to sustain the empire's military reach. As the preparation methods evolved from powdered foam to infused loose leaves, tea crossed into Japan. Carried by Buddhist monks, it became deeply embedded in monastic and aristocratic life. The Japanese tea ceremony, or chanoyu, turned the preparation of the drink into a disciplined art of attention. Every movement focused on humility and the beauty of impermanence. By the time European ships arrived, China had spent centuries perfecting this universe of taste and production. They held a total monopoly on the knowledge and the plant, creating a massive imbalance for any empire that wanted a seat at the table. Tea reached Europe as an exotic novelty. Portuguese and Dutch merchants sold it as a bitter, expensive medicine, while doctors debated whether the leaf was a cure for melancholy or a threat to the stomach. The British East India Company integrated tea into daily life by linking it to Caribbean sugar. Sweetened by the labor of enslaved people, the drink moved out of the pharmacy and into the domestic drawing room. Massive government taxes eventually pushed the trade into the shadows. Along the British coast, smugglers landed illegal cargoes at night, turning a respectable household habit into a massive criminal economy. In the North American colonies, the leaf became a symbol of constitutional crisis. The Tea Act of 1773 used cheap East India Company tea as a trap, forcing colonists to choose between a low price and the principle of representation. Destroying 342 chests in Boston Harbor was a piece of deliberate political theater. The colonists were signaling that a commodity could not be separated from the power that controlled it. The leaf now carried two different meanings across the Atlantic. In America, rejecting tea was an act of patriotic rebellion. In Britain, drinking it was becoming the ultimate sign of national identity. By the 1800s, Britain's obsession with tea created a financial drain. China accepted only silver in exchange for its leaves, and the British Empire hated watching its precious metals disappear into the Qing treasury. This trade cycle shows how the East India Company balanced the books. They used their colonial holdings in India to grow opium and smuggled the drug into China, using the profits to pay for their tea habit. As addiction and social crisis spread, Chinese official Lin Zexu launched a mission to stop the trade. In 1839, he seized and destroyed massive quantities of foreign opium at Humen, rendering it useless with lime and salt water. Britain responded with industrial military force. Modern steamships and naval artillery exposed the vulnerability of the Qing military, forcing China into a series of humiliating negotiations. The 1842 Treaty of Nanjing forced China to cede Hong Kong and open its ports to British trade. It was the beginning of what would be remembered as the century of humiliation. The British tea table was now directly subsidized by a narco-war. Domestic comfort in one empire was tied to the violent destabilization of another. The Opium Wars taught Britain that depending on China for tea was an imperial vulnerability. To truly secure the habit, they needed to own the means of production. The empire pivoted to the hills of Assam in India. Following the discovery of wild tea plants growing outside Chinese territory, Britain began building an entirely new industry from the ground up. Using massive capital and coercive colonial labor, they cleared forests to create vast plantations. This was an empire of leaves, a self-sustaining system of extraction under absolute British control. The violent machinery behind the trade was hidden beneath a civilized surface. All the conflict and labor vanished the moment the cup was poured, leaving only a ritual of warmth and comfort. The same leaf that offered humanity its deepest moments of spiritual peace was successfully manipulated to justify the modern world's most aggressive expansions. Tea didn't just comfort empires, it helped build them. By the early 19th century, the British East India Company had morphed from a simple trading venture into a sprawling territorial power. They were collecting taxes, passing laws, and commanding armies across India. But they had a massive vulnerability. Their most lucrative commodity, tea, was entirely controlled by China. To secure their economy, the British needed to break that monopoly and grow the leaf on their own conquered soil. The plant itself was already growing semi-wild in the forests of Assam. Indigenous groups like the Singpho had used it for generations. British officials quickly claimed these plants, but raw leaves are useless without the centuries of highly refined processing expertise required to make them drinkable. The empire had the land, but they lacked the knowledge. The solution was Robert Fortune. The East India Company sent him deep into Chinese tea-growing regions in disguise. His assignment was industrial theft. He mapped out cultivation techniques, recruited skilled Chinese tea makers, and smuggled out thousands of seeds and living plants. Moving living botany across oceans required the Wardian case. These tightly sealed glass boxes created a protective microclimate, shielding fragile tea seedlings from the salt and harsh weather of a long sea voyage. Britain systematically extracted a civilization's agricultural heritage to build an imperial monopoly. They moved knowledge with the same cold efficiency they used to move territory. Turning wild Assamese and Ceylonese forests into an imperial industry required massive ecological engineering. Diverse landscapes were wiped away and replaced with vast, disciplined rows of tea bushes designed entirely for extraction. To harvest these massive new estates, plantation owners imported vulnerable, impoverished laborers from across India. Contracts trapped them on isolated properties where disease and debt were rampant. This brutal system had a single purpose: to supply the British public with cheap, domestically grown tea. As production scaled up, the global market developed a ruthless obsession with speed. The freshest spring leaves commanded the highest auction prices in London. Merchants began racing their cargo across the globe on tea clippers, vessels built with narrow hulls and massive sails. A commodity of taste was suddenly measured in time. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 shattered this romantic maritime spectacle. Steamships replaced wind-powered clippers, cutting the journey short and turning a high-stakes ocean race into a predictable, industrialized logistics chain. The empire had successfully rewired the global economy. By seizing the plant and utilizing steam power, they bypassed China and built an infinitely scalable supply chain on top of Indian land. Back in Britain, the results of this global extraction were carefully domesticated. The Victorian tea table became a theater of polite manners, featuring fine porcelain and silver spoons. It allowed households to participate in imperial trade, while stripping away any visible evidence of the violence required to produce it. For the industrial working class, The aesthetic was irrelevant. Heavily sweetened black tea offered cheap, immediate caloric energy. It provided a structured, reliable pause that helped laborers survive the exhaustion of a factory shift or a coal mine. This universal appeal comes down to the plant's unique chemistry. Tea contains caffeine, which stimulates the nervous system, but it also contains an amino acid called L-theanine. This compound smooths out the caffeine spike, creating a state of focused attention rather than overwhelming ignition. Because tea adapts to the needs of the human body, colonized societies easily reclaimed it. In India, people took the colonial export crop and completely reinvented it. By boiling strong black tea with milk, sugar, and local spices, they created masala chai, a drink deeply woven into vibrant communal street life. The leaf possesses a rare duality. Its chemistry provided the polite refinement favored by the wealthy, while simultaneously providing physical endurance for the workers who fueled the industrial age. A raw tea leaf has no specific identity. The difference between green, black, and oolong tea comes entirely from human intervention. Processors manipulate heat, moisture, and oxidation over specific intervals of time. A slight change in temperature or drying method completely alters the final chemical makeup. To guarantee consistency in this process, the British plantation operated as an institution of total control. Estate managers dictated the agricultural yields, but they also controlled the housing, the movement, and the medical care of the workforce, creating a closed ecosystem of dependency. Advertisers quickly learned how to monetize this landscape. They took the steep, grueling terrain of Darjeeling and sold it as an image of mist and purity. The grueling reality of the labor was erased, and the geography itself was bottled into a brand. Consumers embraced this imagery. Modern consumerism relies heavily on managed distance. When the physical production of a good happens thousands of miles away, the geographical map acts as a moral anesthetic. By detaching the leaf from the labor that produced it, the empire created an innocent national identity out of a stolen foreign commodity. Because tea is culturally polite, it wears a soft mask. It rarely looks brutal. But producing high-quality tea requires the relentless, repetitive plucking of the top two leaves and a bud. This intense physical burden was overwhelmingly placed on the shoulders of women, whose bodies absorbed the true cost of a fresh harvest. Yet within these rigid confines, these workers were not passive shadows in a scenic background. They carried their languages into the fields, formed families, maintained traditions, and actively organized labor movements to fight for basic dignity. They were fighting against what we can call a dark machine. This is a massive economic chain where the consumer, the merchant, the tax collector, and the plantation owner all focus only on their specific transaction, pretending they are completely separate from the violence of the whole system. This machine ran on 7 gears. First, mass social addiction. Next, state taxation. Then, the resulting opium trade imbalance, enforced by military violence. Finally, botanical theft, coerced plantation labor, and the illusion of modern branding. Individually, each gear seemed like a standard business practice. Locked together, they formed a ruthless economic engine that rearranged the globe while shielding every single participant from moral accountability. The 20th century pushed this machine even further into mass production with the invention of the tea bag. By using smaller, lower-quality particles called fannings or dust, corporations made brewing tea incredibly fast and convenient, entirely stripping away the careful craft of the whole leaf. Modern blending requires absolute consistency. Consumers expect a brand to taste the same in December as it does in July. To achieve this, companies mix crops from all over the world. The specific mountain, the individual estate, and the worker who plucked the leaf vanish behind a colorful label. But humanity continually outgrows the systems built to control it. The empire's script could not contain the cultures that adopted the leaf. From the vibrant youth culture of Taiwanese bubble tea to the deep, enduring rituals of Moroccan hospitality, people continually forge connections that belong entirely to them. Despite those beautiful adaptations, the core mechanics of the modern supply chain remain intact. The immense volume of cheap tea required by the global market still relies heavily on price pressure, structural inequality, and invisible labor. The global performance of peace and hospitality relies on the very systems it works to conceal. Every cup of tea contains a history of extraction that continues long after the steam has vanished. Every commodity system imagines itself as permanent. Empires and plantation owners assume that if they control the land and the crop, they perfectly control the people who work it. They believe workers will always bend and consumers will always obey. But people do not simply stay where power places them. When the British government placed heavy taxes on tea to generate massive revenues, ordinary consumers turned to illicit networks. Villagers protected smugglers and moved contraband inland along dark coastlines, deciding that affordable tea mattered more to them than strict obedience to customs law. Across the Atlantic, American colonists turned this defiance into theater. By dumping East India Company tea into Boston Harbor, they rejected Parliament's authority to tax them without direct representation. They made the water speak, turning a simple agricultural good into a blunt political message. On the plantations of Assam and Sri Lanka, colonial power was close, constant, and brutal. Estate management controlled housing, movement, and punishment. Yet even within the vast scale of these fields, laborers pushed back. They slowed their work, challenged abusive recruiters, and joined labor movements to demand basic wages and dignity. When a commodity becomes a daily necessity, people feel entitled to it. They will desert, organize, or break the law to secure it. No state or company can indefinitely dictate the flow of a good once it enters the bloodstream of everyday life. Over time, colonized societies took this imperial product and rebuilt it for themselves. In India, tea escaped the quiet manners of the British drawing room. Vendors on hot, noisy street corners boiled the leaves into a thick, sweet liquid, turning a colonial crop into a democratic, public rhythm known as chai. As the 20th century accelerated, the broader tea industry adapted to the speed of modern life. An American merchant helped popularize the tea bag. It was highly efficient: drop, steep, remove, drink. It perfectly fit the schedules of factories and offices, but it placed a tiny curtain between the drinker and the leaf, making the origins of the plant much harder to see. To guarantee a perfectly uniform cup every single morning, blenders began mixing leaves from entirely different regions and continents. If the weather changed a harvest's flavor, blending smoothed the difference. Consistency became a promise, but achieving that consistency required erasing the seasonal realities of the farms. With the actual geography obscured, companies used packaging to tell a new story. Paper boxes and branded labels offered manufactured images of misty, tranquil mountains and smiling workers. For consumers who would never visit a real tea garden, the package successfully replaced the memory of origin. When decolonization swept across the globe after World War II, the maps changed color, but the economic structures remained intact. Newly independent nations inherited vast plantation systems explicitly built for export. They found their economies still fiercely tethered to the low prices demanded by foreign buyers. To survive the modern era, tea had to become cheap, predictable, and incredibly easy to consume. It succeeded, but that survival relied on keeping the leaf and the labor required to harvest it completely out of sight. Even in the 19th century, the plantation operated as a strict industrial environment. Leaves were withered, rolled, and oxidized in controlled estate factories. It was a hybrid system, combining the bare hands of local laborers with the mechanical discipline of colonial oversight. As mass-produced tea flooded European cities, it entered the lives of working-class laborers navigating their own industrial grind. Inside factories, mines, and slums ruled by whistles and shift clocks, a cup of strong, sweet tea offered a momentary, humanizing pause. It warmed tired bodies and stretched meager meals. During the World Wars, governments recognized this psychological weight. For soldiers in the mud and civilians enduring bombardment, holding those simple white mugs created a brief illusion of domestic normality. Tea acted as vital emotional infrastructure, providing routine in the middle of chaos. Across the world, distinct cultures preserved the drink as a profound tool for connection. In Russia, the samovar turned waiting into a domestic ceremony against the long winters. And in the disciplined sparseness of a Japanese tea room, the preparation of a single bowl stripped away ego and demanded absolute humble attention. Armies occupy land, but a drink occupies memory. Tea secured its global reach because it successfully answered a universal human need to pause, gather, and find comfort when the world feels too large. As markets expanded, companies realized they were no longer selling loose leaves. By wrapping tea in bold typography and standardized designs, they offered consistency. A consumer didn't need to know the harvest season or the estate. They only needed to trust the logo. The industry began selling emotional identity. This shift widened the distance between field and cup. A batch of tea now passed through brokers, blenders, packers, and distributors. At every step, a company took a margin, leaving the individuals plucking the leaves with the least power to negotiate their wages. Today, tea acts as a platform for endless customization. It appears in convenience store refrigerators, in wellness-branded matcha powders, and in the giant plastic boba cups anchoring global franchises. These playful, highly social drinks introduce tea to a new generation, entirely detached from the aesthetics of agriculture. In response, ethical consumption labels like Fair Trade emerged to try and reconnect drinkers to the reality of production. They ask crucial questions about wages and land use. But tea remains a globally competitive market. The structural demand from retailers for incredibly low costs limits how much benefit reaches the workers. Modern commerce excels at smoothing out rough edges. It takes a sprawling archive of human labor, ecological extraction, and cultural adaptation, and efficiently distills it into simplified, guilt-free menu options. This leaves us with a difficult reality. A drink universally celebrated for hospitality, calm, and refinement was historically leveraged to finance immense violence and systemic coercion. Tea made societies feel civilized while heavily relying on systems of exploitation. This diagram shows the brutal economic triangle of imperial absorption. The system begins with a Chinese leaf, sweetens it with sugar harvested through Atlantic slavery, and finances the entire operation by pushing Indian opium into Chinese markets. All of it converges into a single British teacup. These exact trade networks generated staggering wealth for the empire. Yet, back home, the sheer violence of these global supply chains was entirely hidden behind a carefully crafted facade of patriotic domesticity and polite afternoon rituals. And yet, the working-class families pouring this dark liquid into a chipped ceramic mug were not imperial masterminds. For a miner or a factory worker, the warmth they found in that cup was entirely genuine. A physical object can be born from profound injustice and still become incredibly meaningful to the people who consume it. Recognizing this paradox does not mean you have to pour your cup down the sink or perform moral despair every time you boil water. History does not demand purity. Instead, it demands attention. Asking where the leaf comes from, who grew it, and who profited, we stop the final violence of forgetting. We can learn to look at the cup and honestly hold two truths at once, honoring the deep comfort it brings while refusing to ignore the heavy burden of its history. For a long time, modern tea made itself forgettable. A paper bag dropped into a morning mug before work, or a plastic bottle grabbed from a convenience store fridge. It became so adaptable and so ordinary that its deep history simply vanished into our everyday routines. But that is starting to reverse. Tired of anonymous products and the relentless speed of digital life, consumers are asking questions again. They want to know the origin of the leaf. They want to know the specific terroir, the harvest season, and the people who actually cultivated it. This curiosity has brought respect back to the agricultural craft. You see producers using their bare hands to press green tea against heated metal woks, relying on generations of intimate manual knowledge to coax out specific flavors. There is a tension here, though. While this attention honors incredible skill, it also invites the luxury market. When traditional culture is absorbed by high-end commerce, it risks being distorted into just another premium performance for wealthy buyers. Take matcha. Once deeply tied to Zen aesthetics and quietly whisked in a rustic bowl, it is now a global wellness prop. It's baked into cakes, blended into smoothies, and marketed for calm energy. A deeply disciplined tradition has been swallowed by a highly profitable flavor trend. Other styles strike a different balance. Indian chai travels the world as a simplified cafe syrup, yet remains stubbornly local in the home kitchens and street stalls of its origin. Meanwhile, the bright menus of Taiwanese bubble tea reinvented the leaf entirely, carrying diaspora identity and modern youth culture across the globe. But beneath all these modern aesthetics lie the darker files of tea's history. Historians are reopening the ledgers, reconnecting our genteel teacups to the violence that spread them. The Opium Wars. The corporate imperialism of the East India Company, the massive, brutal labor systems of colonial plantations. A cup of tea has never been innocent. Understanding this massive historical burden does not destroy our enjoyment of it. Replacing ignorance with actual attention gives the drink its power back, deepening the experience of every sip. The modern crisis of tea begins in the dirt. The plant relies on highly specific elevations, mists, and seasonal rhythms. Rising temperatures and sudden torrential rain damage yields and threaten to erase the specific flavors and cultural memories of entire regions. When those hillsides collapse, the risk travels strictly downward. The farmers and smallholders who are least responsible for global emissions stand closest to the ruined soil, facing debt and total unpredictability. Then there is the human cost. For centuries, the industry has praised the elegance of the leaf while squeezing the people who pick it. Women, who perform the bulk of the plucking, face immense physical strain carrying heavy woven baskets, often for low pay on estates that dictate their housing and healthcare. We claim we want fair labor and sustainable farming, yet when standing in the supermarket aisle, we consistently reach for the cheapest box on the shelf. The mass market relies entirely on millions of those exact, quiet choices. Cheap tea is comforting precisely because it asks nothing of us at the checkout. The true bill for that convenience, the climate damage, the exploited labor, is simply being paid by communities half a world away. Today, tea is no longer controlled by a single empire. It operates as a vast planetary machine, filled with wildly different economies that overlap and collide. This diagram shows the immense distance a single leaf travels today. It moves from the plant, to the worker, to the processor. Then it hits the brokers, the blenders, the massive global brands, the retailers, and eventually you. Along the way, a massive inequality of narrative takes shape. Expensive specialty teas get a direct golden line to the consumer, carrying rich origin stories. But the vast majority of leaves are dumped into opaque commodity blends, their origins intentionally hidden. Look inside a modern industrial processing plant, and you see the true scale of the system. Billions of cups are brewed from anonymous leaves that offer zero connection to the soil they grew in. Every day, cheap tea is the true modern empire. Its future won't be decided by a king. It will be shaped by the millions of tiny, repetitive choices made every single day by farmers, brokers, and ultimately us. After everything this plant has been through, after the rise and fall of dynasties, corporations, and colonies, the strangest thing is that its core remains untouched. It still requires nothing more than a leaf, water, heat, time, and human attention. Because of that simplicity, distinct traditions manage to survive. You see it in China's deep civilization of agricultural care, and in Japan's disciplined silence, where a cracked bowl and a slow pour elevate the ordinary into something sacred. But it doesn't require silence to matter. It survives in the movement and heat of chai boiling on an Indian street corner. It survives in Britain, where switching the kettle on remains the most practical response to good news, bad news, and everything in between. We also have to acknowledge the darker things that survived: the environmental scars of monoculture farming, the severe economic pressure on growers, the social architecture of unequal tradies and colonial plantations that still shape producing nations today. History doesn't vanish just because a drink tastes good. Holding both the beauty of the ritual and the brokenness of the supply chain requires a mature kind of memory. We have to let go of the idea that human comfort needs to be completely innocent in order to mean something. Tea acts as a mirror, showing us exactly how civilization operates. We don't experience world history as a treaty or a battlefield. We experience it as the sugar dissolving in our mug, or the hot drink in our hands. Civilization hides its most enormous, violent systems inside our daily comforts. We live in an era of blinding speed and invisible supply chains. We consume products instantly. But tea still demands that we wait for the water to boil and the leaves to steep. In a fast world, that waiting is a quiet rebellion. It creates a space for us to actually pay attention. And if we pay attention, the cup offers a warning. It tells us that human desires, once they get large enough, build massive systems to feed themselves. Habit becomes trade becomes coercion, and coercion becomes history. This single plant moved from Asian forests to imperial warships, establishing trade routes that tied distant continents together. It conquered through the power of desire. Once it became an indispensable habit, empires built the massive systems necessary to secure the supply. So don't stop drinking tea, but the next time you hold a cup, take the pause it gives you. The modern world arrived through gunpowder and coal, but it also traveled through this leaf. Take a sip and finally taste the history inside it.